Randy?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
That's what you call
it.
That's called a display bugle, actually, just so you know. That's a bull trying to call his cows and say, hey, come over here. Just so you know. Isn't it, Randy?
Yes, it is.
There's a big difference.
Huge difference.
And that was awesome.
That was pretty good. Yeah, that's one of our, I was like, what is that reefer? What is that noise in the background? Oh, well, that's a good way to start the podcast. Ozonics Killerwinds podcast. We're back again. I'm Cole Tanner.
I'm Nick Simon.
We've got a special guest today. We've got my really good friend. Honestly, Randy's probably one of my best friends. His name's Randy Stoppenhagen. Thanks for being here, Randy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys, for having me on. I look forward to the opportunity.
Yeah. Yep, Randy and I, like I said, I was thinking about this all weekend about doing this podcast and thinking about how I would describe Randy. And I feel like I heard this thing a long time ago that it said that you can, a good way to kind of look at yourself and the character of yourself is to look at the people that you surround yourself with. And that makes me feel a little bit good because Randy is one of the best people I know.
100%.
Yeah. Just do anything for anybody.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I'm really thankful to call Randy one of my really good friends. And like I said, it's pretty awesome.
Yep.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Feeling right back at you. I mean, you and I get along really well. I mean, we've had a couple tense moments. We won't go into that.
Yeah, we have.
But we've worked through it. That's the thing. I think that's what bonds us even closer is through adversity. You work through it and you understand each other better.
Yep.
And I appreciate you.
Yeah. So Randy and I met, I don't even know what year it was. I think it was 2018. It was the winter of 2018. And I actually maybe saw you on the road because you were on the road at consumer shows, hunting consumer shows in 2017. And I just briefly kind of walked through his booth. I think we were in Ohio. I didn't really, it's just like before the show, kind of lollygag and walking around. It was funny because when I remember that day, Randy wasn't in a good mood. I think he'd had a long show. I think it was like a Sunday morning, so it was like we've been there Friday, Saturday, and like by Sunday, you're just like grinding it out,
Well, the reason why is because at that Ohio show, I was on an exterior wall.
Yeah, way on the left-hand side.
Right. And they didn't quite sell the show.
Yeah.
So instead of moving all the aisles one way or the other and moving our drape closer, there was literally 40 to 50 feet when people turned the corner. And then they'd look way over at us, and then they'd just turn and keep going down the next aisle. Yeah. It was like I had to be a carnival barker to try to get people to come over to the booth, and that was not fun. So.
Yeah, but we're really where Randy and I really first actually met and had a good conversation was at the Great American Outdoor Show in Harrisburg the next winter. And Ozonics at that time had just gone online only. So we had just kind of pulled out of all retail, 4 to 6 weeks ago. We had really just freshly ripped off the Band-Aid. And I think us going to the consumer shows, we were all kind of holding our breath to see what type of, reaction we were going to get. Because again, at the Harrisburg show, we're literally right across from Lancaster Archery.
Yeah.
They've got like a 20 by 80, what
Yeah.
I mean? It's this huge booth. And you're like, great. And so we're kind of like setting up, feel like a little bit like our tail between our legs, trying to just mind our own business. And this guy walks up and we start talking. He said, hey, I just want to tell you, I think what you guys did with going online only and making a huge stance and taking a step like that, I commend you for that. That really motivates me. I'm a small company, And so we just got to talking. And like I said, Randy owns a company called C3 Mitts. They make a line of insulated mitts that you can wrap around the riser of your bow, or it goes around the stock of a shotgun or a crossbow. And that really resonated with me because we've talked about this earlier. I struggle with cold hands. It's just always a thing. I just can't ever get away from it. And so after we got to talk, and then I went and checked it out, really looked at it, I was like, okay, I'm totally using this thing. This really helps me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so it kind of sparked our friendship, and it went on from there.
Yep. I mean, you've actually taken quite a few animals with that mitt. I mean, you've sent me some awesome turkey pictures in the spring, and then you've sent me a lot of whitetail pictures.
Yeah.
I know it does get cold in Iowa, especially late season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and that was the funny thing when Randy and I were talking that day, we just kind of kept talking, and then all of a sudden he made a comment. He's like, "Well, have you ever done any elk hunting?" I'm like, yeah, I love elk hunting." He said, "Oh man, if you're ever interested, I've got this cool spot in Idaho. I'm from there, and I've got this national forest spot that I go to. I've been hunting a long time. If you're ever interested," I said, "Well, don't tell me that." I said, don't extend an invite unless you're serious, because I'll show up, And then fast forward the following fall, so the fall of 2019, I ended up out there with Randy, and we elk hunted. So yeah, it was just kind of funny, and we saw each other, and we do see each other a lot during the winter months, because we would just kind of ping pong around to all these different shows, and you feel a little bit of camaraderie with all the men and women that you see on the road all the time, because we all are kind of in the same boat. You know what I mean? You're away from your families, you're away from your friends, and so that kind of becomes like your little group, Yeah,
and then there's the summer shows, Cole.
I know.
Remember going to Alabama?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So Nick, I wanted to prove to myself how far south I could go with my product.
Yep.
Because normally I'm a north product. So I go to Birmingham, Alabama. Now, I'm from Idaho, where there's zero humidity.
Yeah.
Okay. And I stepped foot in Alabama, and I could not breathe. And the facility, no air conditioning was running.
Not until the show started.
Yeah. So we unload, and by the time I get my booth done, and mine was fairly simple, the Ozonics booth was, and we were right across the aisle from each other. It takes a while to set that booth up. Well, from head to toe, I mean, even my shorts, soaking wet.
Oh, yeah,
and there were girls coming around going, "Here, have some water, have some water." I mean, it was horrible.
It was so bad. Well, I think the idea behind him, because we did a whole circuit. Mm-hmm. We did Birmingham, Alabama, and then we did Florida. Like the week after that, we did, was it Lakeland, Florida or something? Yeah, Lakeland, Florida, which we thought Alabama was hot.
Yeah.
And then we got to Florida, and it felt like Alabama was air conditioning. I mean, it was so bad. So bad.
Oh, and it rained,
Yeah, it rained.
The rains were torrential rain.
Yeah, and on the drive down there, it was raining so hard, like windshield wipers as fast as they could go, and it was almost a point where we had our hazards on. I mean, we were like just crawling down the interstate.
Yeah.
And then we did, there's like these Texas trophy hunter shows. They do them in Dallas, Fort Worth. They do them in Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, and in San Antonio. We did those. But I think the idea behind for you going to those shows, Randy, was like, and we talked a lot about this, and I feel like we get this a lot at Ozonics too, in the fact of, you inherently think that his whole mitt system is great for just Midwestern hunters, which is true. It is great for guys in the Midwest, upper Midwest. The fact is it gets to November, December, and it's cold. I don't care who you are. You can go out there and sit in 30 degrees, but if you try to sit all day and the wind's blowing it all, like it eventually starts to bite you.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. But the thing and the idea behind going to those Southern shows was that we hear this all the time. All these guys who Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, the Carolinas, they end up hunting the Midwest.
Exactly.
And I think that one of the things that you hear a lot of guys say when they come to the Midwest, when they're from the South and the Southeast, is, man, I'm not used to that cold.
Yeah.
Because they're used to humidity, but they're not used to cold humidity.
Exactly.
And that's, I think, the difference with Iowa, Illinois, all the way across either direction is it's cold, but then it's humid.
Yeah.
And when you get that moisture in the air and it's cold, man, it just like really, really, it feels like it just bites you. You hear people describe it as like, man, that just bites. And it does.
Or it gets to your bones. That's the way it feels for me. Because coming from a part of the country where there's no humidity, I've hunted the UP of Michigan. and it goes right to your bone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Oh man,
The good thing about going to Florida was that I actually landed an archery shop. They were like, this is a no-brainer because also everything's relative. When it's 40 degrees in Florida, they're freezing.
Yes.
So I actually sold product to an archery store in Florida, so it was worth it to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say, like you said, shameless plug, get on C3mitts.com. Seriously, it's an awesome website.
Yeah.
Like you said, he's got his phone number on there. You're going to call and talk to Randy. Check him out on Instagram, Facebook, C3mitts.com. They're pretty awesome. Like I said, I swear by it. Like I said, I mean, I really do. Yeah, and you know me. I mean, I get to be quite the gear snob when it comes to stuff, and I don't use it unless it really helps me. And I've had great luck with that with the mitts.
Yep.
So,
Thanks.
And Randy's my friend, so
go
and buy one right now. All right, so let's get back to it. So so the first thing I wanted to ask you about, Randy, is talk to me a little bit about how long have you been elk hunting? I mean, I know you're like, what are you, 84? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get my punches in because when we get out there, he's going to probably like walk right past me because we're not used to the altitude. So I'm trying to get my punches in.
You're on my turf.
Yeah, that's right. No, but so seriously, how long have you been elk hunting, Randy? When was the first, can you remember your first elk hunt or just when you first started it?
It would have been 2002.
Okay.
2001, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And just so you know, I mean, I was not raised a hunter.
Right.
My dad didn't hunt. I didn't start hunting till I was 30 years old.
Okay.
And I cut my teeth in Michigan. That's where I caught the bug. Sitting there knowing that any second something can change really intrigued me. The whole thing about hunting really intrigued me. So my cousins from Michigan were like, Idaho is a target-rich environment. You should really figure out your hunting out there. So I started chasing mule deer, and from mule deer, I did a little bit of bear hunting, and I had a friend who took me coyote hunting in the winter, and he asked me if I had ever elk hunted. And so that next September, he invited me up, and of course, at that time, everybody went the third week.
Yeah.
And the third week was the magical week. That's supposedly when the rut was happening. And at the time, there were no wolves introduced to Idaho, and the bulls would scream. And that's where I caught the bug for elk hunting. And now today, 20 some years later, if I had to give everything else up and could only hunt one thing, it would be September and elk, hands down.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I've gotten to know that about you. Yeah. Like I said, you really have the sweet tooth for elk hunting,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, getting to know Randy, that's the one thing that's nice about for him living out in Idaho and being in the Western states is how we hunt the Midwest a good section of the season.
Yeah.
We don't hunt 5-7 days a week, but we'll hunt 1 or 2 days every week. We just kind of, the drum just kind of beats on and on and on.
Yep.
Randy hunts pretty much like 30 days straight.
Yeah, I do.
Owns his own business. Like I said, he has a water feature business that he does. He's been very successful in that Boise area, and he sets up his schedule. So when it comes to end of September or end of August, sayonara till October.
Yep. I'll take the camper up. In fact, I went up 3-4 weeks ago, did some work up there, and then I'll go back up probably 7 days before you fly out, the 31st. So I'll go up the 23rd, 22nd, and I'll get my camper up there, get everything ready, get it set up. And then come usually opening day, it is on. And I don't care if it's 85, 90 degrees during the day. It always cools down at night. And then I'll hunt for a week, usually opening week. Then I might go home for a couple of days, but then I'm right back up there, and I'll hunt all the way through the end of the season. So
yeah. So with that said, one of the questions I was going to ask you as well is, how do you feel like how have you hunted differently since you started, like you said, in the early 2000s? What do you do that you look back at now from when you first started hunting? You're like, wow, I can't believe I I did it that way, or what's changed for you? What has evolved?
Okay, well, I would say when I first started, the guys that showed me the ropes, and this is what everybody did. You got out to a specific spot just as it was turning, and you'd locate bugle. And inevitably, probably by the third bugle, you'd get a response, and it might light up, boom, 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 3 different bugles. Well, then you go, okay, which one's the closest? Which one's the best for the wind? Which one sounds the most aggressive? Okay, that's the one we're going after. And usually what would happen is we'd bail off, go down into a drainage, and then we'd chase him all the way back up the mountain. And I, and then that same first year, I went back up the last week. And because I just couldn't get enough. And that's one thing about me. If I like something, I am all in. But if I don't really care for it, then I just, nope, no thanks.
Right.
So I went back up the last week by myself. And then a guy came up and asked if he could stay in my camper from the original camp a week and a half earlier. I said, sure, that's fine. Well, I didn't really know the lay of the land. I only knew a couple spots to go to. This was back when there wasn't a GPS and we didn't have our cell phones. And I mean, it was like learning the land and trying to get yourself back out, then going a little bit deeper, getting yourself back out. So we killed a spike. And the way I did it was we went to this place that I called the Killing Fields, because over the years, we killed a lot of bulls in this meadow. And I'd set up, and then I'd put my shooter off in a certain spot, and I'd just start cow calling. And I'd sweet talk, and I'd pick up the rhythm, and then I'd slow it down, and I'd break sticks. And we had a raghorn come out, and I saw the raghorn coming to my shooter, and I thought, oh, what do I do? So I turned, I ripped off this big, nasty bugle, and that raghorn spun around and ran off. And the guy comes over, he goes, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I was trying to stop him. He goes, you scared the out of him. So anyway, I'm like, okay, well, let's just keep going. So I did a bunch more cow calls, and here came a spike. And he walked right in front of my shooter, and my shooter shot, but he shot way low. It hit the ground and came up into his back leg.
Oh.
And the elk kept coming, and he was coming right in front of me. So I knocked an arrow, and he comes perfectly broadside, and I just punched him right where you need to. And he went down over the hill. We recovered him. It was snowing. I mean, it was awesome. Mm-hmm. I mean, so for my very first year elk hunting, I learned something. That, hey, it's not always bugle, 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 bugle. Well, right. then you have an introduction, you have an introduction of wolves. Now the elk go silent. Mm-hmm. Because if they pipe off, they're ringing the dinner bell for themselves, like, hey, come eat me. So I had to switch up tactics. So we still did bugling, but it was like it wasn't super productive. And then the hoochie mama came out. So Randy had to go out and buy a hoochie mama. And I did that for a year or two and then threw that away. Yeah. So I went back to a mouth reed because you can really change your cadence, your pitch, the whininess of it. And the progression from bugling to cow calling and hyperlipping. The very first year that we did it exclusively, we set up in that same killing meadow. In one day, we called in 14 bulls.
Yeah.
I mean, it was insane. But the problem was we were so young and immature about setups that the elk would come running across that open meadow, and then they'd turn about 60, 70 yards, and they'd start looking into the woods. And my shooter was on the edge of the woods, and I was in the woods. Mm-hmm. So it was just he wasn't comfortable taking that shot. So, But at the end of the day, we looked at each other like, we just hit something really sweet. So that worked for 7-8 years. But just like I didn't start hunting till I was 30. Well, I didn't have the same momentum that I did when I was 30 to go chase them.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I had to find another way, which meant looking at trails and looking at where they travel in the morning, and then using a little bit of the whitetail knowledge. I figured I was going to hang a tree stand on these trails. So beforehand, I went out and put up some trail cameras, and sure enough, right about the middle of July, animals started showing up, and then it would pick up. They're starting to break off from their bachelor groups.
Yep.
And they're starting to travel because they're looking for cows and they're looking for new food or whatever they're doing. So I hung a tree stand, and by golly, that worked. Now it doesn't work. There's times I've sat from 6:45 in the morning till 1 and absolutely nothing. And then there's times when I've sat there and 7 cows and a raghorn and a spike and then a big bull come by. So it's what I do now is I sit in the morning and I chase them in the evening, because if nothing else, sitting in that tree, I can hear them bugling. I can pick out where they're at. And I've hunted this same mountain for 20 some years. So I know it. And I know that, hey, I can come back this evening and I know there's a bull in this drainage. I'm going to try to figure out, sneak down, get where I think he's at, and then try to get him to pipe up or grunt a little bit from his bed before he gets up. And then the chase is on till you run out of light.
Yeah, no, that's really something. Like I said, that's, it's funny. I hear a lot of things in there that, as an elk hunter myself, that I've gone through those same kind of learnings, right? Like, when I first started elk hunting, the only way I knew anything about elk hunting was watching hunting videos. Back in the day, it was Will Primos Speak the Language. There was some elk hunting videos that he did, and then my brother-in-law, who was just my good buddy at the time, his dad had done some elk hunting, and so I didn't know anything about anything. And so I think that how it's changed for me is when I first started, that's what I inherently thought that you could do. You could just go out there and you could call at them and they were just going to come running, bugling in. And that's just not how it is.
Yeah.
When I would watch a lot of it on TV as a kid, they were killing an elk every single time. They didn't really show all the other times when it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And I think what I inherently figured out pretty quickly is that when it comes to calling elk or chasing after them or getting it out there and spot and stalking, however you want to call it, the majority of the time it doesn't work. There's a lot of swing and misses. You know what I mean? Elk hunting that way it's a lot like baseball. It's like if you can bat 300, you've had a pretty good career.
Yeah.
That means 3 out of 7 times you strike out, And so, I think that's one of the things when I look back at it now, and I think what I hear you saying, Randy, is, and I agree with you. I think that you have to try to figure out a way to work smarter rather than harder. You can go out there and work really hard, and you can run all over it. You know what I mean? And there are guys that do that. That just push, and they go deeper and farther than everybody else, and that works too. You know what I mean? But I feel like, you can work smarter rather than harder. Even when I used to guide in Colorado, we would have that conversation with clients that would come in all the time, and we would just right off the bat, we would just ask guys, "What's your expectation? What type of elk hunt do you want to go on?" And guys kind of look at you like, "Well, what do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, what do you want? Like, what are you thinking that you want to do? Like, what in your mind, if this were to play out perfectly, what do you want?" And one guy is like, "Man, I just want to take an elk. I don't care what it is. It could be it could be a raghorn. I don't care. I just want an elk." Perfect. What about you? "Oh man, dude, like I said, I've been watching all the videos. I want one just screaming in my face." Okay. And we would explain to people, it's like, here's the deal, guy. If you really want an opportunity in Southern Colorado, we were at one of the best ways that we have an opportunity to try to harvest an elk is sitting in a tree stand over water, over an alfalfa field, sitting in a ground blind over a water hole, over a wallow. It's not always chasing them. We can chase them.
Yeah.
And you might have some awesome encounters, but 8 out of 10 times, it's not going to work out. You're not even going to get within bow range.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's just, there's just a lot of things when it comes to calling elk that have to come together. And the majority of the time it doesn't. I think that's what I never knew when I started. And you kind of have that rude awakening to all of a sudden be like, oh crap, like this is really hard, you know?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, right. I mean, there's a lot to the game. And I mean, it's not just getting yourself in the right position and knowing the thermals, hopefully knowing some of the lay of the land,
Yep.
knowing where they're probably going to come from. It's how do you talk to them?
Yep.
What do they want to hear? Just like I talked about earlier, bugling, just screaming into that raghorn's face. That was not the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and one thing that I've been guilty of is, well, my cow calling, ear, ear, ear. You can start sounding like a tape recorder.
Yes.
And I love to call. And when we'd go to the killing meadow, I'd put my buddy Matthew out in front of me, and he killed, I think, 2 bulls in there. I killed 2 or 3 bulls in there and a cow. Anyway, but what can happen is the caller can become very lackadaisical. In other words, I'd fall asleep. I would. I mean, we'd go chase him in the morning, and I'd be dog tired, and I'd be like, "Hey, let's just go to the killing meadow. I'll call." So I'd lean up against a log, and I'd start calling, and pretty soon my eyes would get heavy. And then all of a sudden I'd wake up and I'd be like, "Oh, geez, how long have I not been calling?"
I always used to, when I used to guide, it's funny. That was the exact same thing. We get out there, and you'd be like, "All right, we're going to set up right here. You get out in front. And I would always say, let's just let it settle down for a while." So I would get up against a tree, and I would look at my clock. Okay, here we go. And then I would, and you wake up, you're like, where am I? What time is it? How long have we been sitting here?
I know.
But yeah,
and that's the thing about early season, especially early season, like when you're coming out.
Yeah.
I mean, the sun is up. We will be getting up at 4:15.
Yeah.
To be ready, eat something good, fill your gut, get out there, and then we go to bed. By the time the sun goes down, it'll be 9:30.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time you get back to camp and you rip your clothes off and you make something to eat and you get in the wrapper to go to bed, I mean, it's 10:30, 11.
Yeah.
So you're running because you're out for what, 10, 11 days, something like that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So 11 days, you're going to be sleep deprived by day 5.
Yeah.
I mean, you just will. And you just, you'll go out in the morning or when you go out in the evening, you'll just find a nice tree to lean up against and take a little snooze. But so like the calling, one thing that I've really gotten back to in the last 3, 4, 5 years is I've become really good friends because of the industry with Rocky Jacobson.
Mm-hmm.
And that guy is a multiple-time elk calling champion. And he lived in the central part of Idaho, grew up as a logger, invented an awesome mouth reed. Then he created bugle tubes. But that guy knows how to talk to elk. So I have been fortunate enough to learn a lot of things from that guy and listen to him. And the great thing is, for all of us, for all of you watching, you can go to YouTube, type in Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls or Rocky Jacobson, and you can watch those same videos.
Yep.
And he talks about how cows and calf sounds, and then cows when they get excited, and then cows when they're in estrus, and then when the hyperestrus sound, when to use those, what the response is going to be. Same with bugling. There's a locate bugle.
Yep.
Then there's a
challenge. There's a challenge bugle. There's a display bugle. Yep.
Oh,
yeah.
And it's knowing when to use those. I mean, if you've got a bull responding to you and he's very timid, well, you don't throw a challenge bugle like I'm going to come over there and kick your butt. I mean, that's going to shut him up because he doesn't want any part of that.
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate enough, and a lot of it's proven true, that when I get that situation where you always want to meet the bull, not exceed the bull.
Yeah, exactly.
If he challenges me, I might challenge him back, but I'm going to sound like a weaker bull that's maybe a little scared.
Yep.
and then he's going to feel more dominant. So it's all those pieces of the puzzle, and that's what I really love. I love looking at the terrain, looking at the food source, looking at the weather, knowing when to call, when the right call is. And I go back at night and I think to myself, and I mean, Matthew, who I've hunted with for a long time, I mean, he's just like, dude, you need to let it rest. And I'm like, I've got 30 days, man. I am into it for 30 days. I mean, my neck swells up and it's like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. Randy kind of becomes like the movie, The Beautiful Mind. You walk in his camper, there's just sticky notes all over the place. Yeah. Awesome. He's just sitting in the corner, like, going back and forth. He doesn't know what to do. He's just like,
Well, yeah, probably.
Yeah. No. And I'll tell you what, but it's funny. I mean, I get the same way about whitetails. I mean, we sit here and it's like, I've been listening to Nick talk about these 2 bucks he has on camera since 4 weeks ago. And he's like talking about it every day. Like he's hunting tomorrow. He's not hunting for another 2 months yet, but he's like analyzing every little thing. Well, it came from the right today. I mean, yesterday it was on the left. Now it came from the right. But no, you're absolutely right. And there is so much out there on the internet, right? Like I grew up listening and watching. The other guy that I did mention is Wayne Carlton, Wayne Carlton, Hunter Specialties back in the day. I remember, and then Wayne Carlton would be out on the road. I remember going to the Iowa Deer Classic and just standing by whatever booth he was at and just talking to him for as long as he would let me bother him, just about calling elk and how that would work. And I think to Randy's point, there is so much out there on the internet, like guys like Rocky Jacobson, that put out a lot of different information, tutorial type information about how to call.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that, and this is just kind of how I was taught and what my experience taught me, and I would suggest this for anybody that may be listening that's trying to go elk hunting. When you initially go out there and you start calling in or trying to call out elk, just do what they do. That would be what I would say. Number one, if you hear them very lightly cow calling, lightly cow call back. And then I think to Randy's point as well is always meet them, don't exceed them.
Yeah.
You always want to try to sound like you're an inferior bull, that the bull that you're trying to call at can come in and beat you up. From my experience, there's very few times when you're going to actually really, challenge a herd bull and get him to come running over. Those times they do happen. And when you get in those situations, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But
it's incredible.
Yeah. That's like the cat's meow. I mean, that's like the ultimate, but very few times is that happening. Most of the times you're like, to Randy's point, you're doing just a locate bugle at first, just trying to kind of put it out there, to just kind of get a feel. But I think for me, what I really, as I started elk hunting and with zero experience and just going out there and going on multiple trips and not seeing or hearing a thing, like, okay, we're not doing something right here, and then getting in situations and having things go right, having things go wrong. The thing that I would say to someone is just go out there and just do what the elk are doing.
Yeah.
That's a great place to start. So then that kind of segues into what I wanted to talk about too, Randy. I think we're kind of already into it right now, is just some of the things, I don't know what you would call these, just some info, some little tips and tricks about the way elk are. I kind of have a list here of some of the things that I wish people would have explained to me when I first started. I feel like that'll give you a huge leg up if you're going to go out there. Number one, what we have been discussing is vocalization. There are so many different ways that elk are vocal. The way cows are, the way bulls are. Spend some time, get on the internet. I mean, we could do a whole podcast just on the different types of cow mews and bull bugles. I mean, there's a lot to it. There's the locate bugle, there's a display bugle, there's a challenge bugle. There's so much to it. One of the things that I would say, the other thing to talk about with vocalization that seems kind of obvious, but nobody ever taught me, and that I just kind of figured it out, was if you hear elk bugling or if you hear cows mewing, generally that means that they're probably moving. Does that make sense? If you hear an elk bugling, he's he's in his bed and he's getting ready to move, or he's moving. If you hear cows mewing, generally they're mewing, they're rummaging around, they're moving around, they're moving. So if you hear cows mewing or you hear elk bugling, that's a good indicator that they're going in some direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if they're bedded down and they're just bedded down for the morning, sometimes a bull will bugle from his bed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But generally he'll bugle from his bed and then he's getting ready to move. He's saying, okay, ladies, let's go. I'm thirsty. I'm hungry. I don't want to be here anymore. I just smelled something I didn't like. Let's go. And he's trying to get everybody up. Okay, come on, it's going. And a lot of times you'll hear an elk bugle like sound off in his bed, and then all of a sudden a little bit later you'll hear that meow, 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 meow. You'll hear the cows, and then they start to stand up like they're stretching their legs. Okay, all right, which way do you want to go? And that's a great way to know if elk are moving. If you hear them, they're probably moving. Does that make sense? The other thing I would say to that is you're never going to catch them. I say that from being the guy that chased them, being young and dumb. Being 19 years old, there they are. Let's go. You're never going to catch up to them. You are never going to catch them. If you hear a bull bugling in front of you and then he bugles again and he's farther away, you are not going to catch him.
No.
I mean,
No,
you can stay behind them and try to, and then eventually if they get to where they're going, you can catch up to them.
Yeah.
And after a long time, but you're not going to catch them and then get around them. If they're in front of you, they're in front of you. It's incredible how fast they can move.
So last year, it rained overnight. The last morning, Matthew, I already got my bull earlier in the season, and I was up there helping Matthew. So we had a couple other friends that were from back east that were out, and they were up on this ridge top, and they were bugling, and they got this bull to respond. And we were partially down the hill, way back behind him. So I could hear the bull bugle. I couldn't hear him bugling. And I looked at Matthew and I said, okay, let's go. So we jogged down the road, turned right, and then I could hear Nick bugling up the hill. And we jogged down the hill quite a ways, and then we cut in on an old logging road. And we got to the end of that logging road, and they had just been through there. And he was a good bull, according to Matthew. I never saw him. But I set up and started just hyper-lipping like I was a cow left behind, really excited, like, oh, please come back. Don't forget me. And he would turn around and come back. He'd cut the distance in half and just scream at me like, hurry up, get over here.
Yep.
And I would hype. Well, Matthew was working his way up the hill, and Matthew is probably 15 years. Yeah, he's 15 years younger than me, 15, 18 years younger than me. And he's a CrossFit guy.
He rides
motorcycles.
He just makes you feel inherently like super lazy. You see him and you're like, come on. It's just like, come on.
Yeah.
He's super fit.
And the thing about Matthew is, like, when he and I have been out running and gunning together, he kind of lets me walk first, because if he walked first, he'd be so far ahead of me, and I'm gassing it,
even when I've been with Matthew, my pace is like, Matthew's like, I mean, it's just like everywhere he goes, he's only got one speed, and it's fast. He's going. Yeah. It's like his walking is like my jogging. I was like, all right, bro, I'm gonna lead, because then I'm not doing this all morning.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. So he can go.
So he gets up on the side of the hill and he turns around, and I'm hyper lipping, and the bull's coming back and forth. Well, then I see Matthew turn around one more time, and he nods his head and he's gone. And I'm like, here we go. The chase is on, just like the old days. So this guy who's 60 starts up the hill. I get to where he was, and I got this bull just screaming, and he'd come back, but he had a bunch of cows with him, and Matthew caught him. Matthew caught up to him, because this bull was going in and out through the draws, side hilling, And Matthew had to do the same thing. But he got on a trail and he was able to pick up speed and he caught him. And he was right in the middle of all these cows mewing. And the bull, he goes, man, you had him just worked up. He'd turn around. He goes, but I could never see him. Mm-hmm. There was so much brush. He goes, he was right there. He goes, the earth was shaking every time he'd bugle, but I couldn't see him. And then even Matthew ran out of gas. So then I had two options. It was either turn around and go back down through a jungle and come back up and walk all the way back up that road. And I looked at my Onyx and I'm like, oh, it's going to be so much easier just to go straight up to this road up here.
It's so close. It's the lines on the topo map are really close together, but it's only so far.
It was like this.
Yeah.
And all this umbrella brush was growing out. So I was fighting.
Yeah.
And it took me, I was a pool of sweat. It had rained, so I was soaking wet from all the moisture on all the plants. And I got up to that road and I dropped my pack and I went, then that's why I go sit in a tree stand in the morning right
exactly.
there. That's why I go sit in a tree stand.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's the thing. Like you said, chasing them is a tricky thing. It's really hard to catch up to them. Not that you can't, where chasing can pay off at times. I don't know if I would call it chasing. I would just call it following along. Yeah. Because when elk in the morning they'll inherently go to bed in the mornings. So when they start going up and to where they want to bed in dark timber, you'll hear that bull bugling and hear those cows mewing and they're going away. Well, if you can just keep within earshot, okay, they're here. Okay, I walked up here. Now where are they? Oh, they went that way. Okay. And you can keep following. Eventually they're going to slow down and they're going to bed down. Yeah. And then that's when you can start to really close the distance very strategically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
You got to just be super careful because you got to remember the thing about elk hunting in general is just like with what Randy described there. If you're in the whitetail woods, generally it might be like a buck and a doe. Well, that's 4 eyes. Mm-hmm. When you're elk hunting, you could be on a herd of elk. So let's just say you could have 10 cows, a herd bull, and a satellite bull. Well, now all of a sudden I've got 12. I've got 24 eyeballs. There's just a lot going on.
Yeah.
A lot of noses, a lot of eyes, a lot of ears. And I think, Randy, you'll agree with me on this. There's kind of two different trains of thought as well when in those situations. Like the situation that Randy just described. Matthew found himself right in the middle of them. Randy was back here trying to call. Well, when you're out of sight, out of mind, the nice thing that you can do is you can make a lot of racket. Yeah. As a hunting guide, I would break sticks. I would make a lot of racket. I would stomp on the ground, break sticks. I would take a stick and I would rake it up against a tree. You know what I mean? You can make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
You can use your whatever. You always used to carry just like a little tube as for bugling. I would rake that against a tree. You can make the clunk noise with it. You can make a lot of racket. Elk do make a ton of noise. I mean, sometimes they can really sneak through like ghosts, but for the most part, they just break stuff. So that's when you're out of sight, out of mind. But then when you're that's like what Randy was. But when you're Matthew and you're right in the middle of them, man, you got to be careful.
Yeah.
Inherently the idea, and that's where I think, in my experience with clients and my experience in my own hunting, that's where all of a sudden you get in the middle of them and you're so excited and you're worked up and there's just like so much stuff going on and you can't be going like this. You can't, you have to stand there and you've got to really use your eyes, not your body, to assess what's going on. Because if all of a sudden you start making these huge moves, it doesn't take but a couple minutes and the cows go, whoa, no, you're not right. We're going this way. And then you're not in them anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a fine line. I always joked, if you've ever seen the movie Jurassic Park, and all those Jurassic Park movies when I was a kid, they always said, when a T-Rex sees you, just don't move. Because if you don't move, they just have a hard time picking you out. That's the way elk are. Like Matthew, most likely in that situation, when he got up in the middle of them, he tried to find his way into some sort of brush to tuck in, just to break up his outline, just standing there ready to go, but being very, very careful with his movement because they were all around him. But if you don't move, they aren't going to see you. There's been multiple times when we've even got caught in the open. You're caught along the edge. All of a sudden the bull just steps out and you just stop. They'll look your way. And if you don't move, they'll just kind of look right past you, but they see that movement and they're gone. You know what I mean? So, You just got to be careful about your movement when you're in the middle of them. If you're back off of them and you're calling, you can make some racket, make it sound realistic, like you're a bull breaking stuff, making a bunch of chasing cows around type stuff. Did you freeze, Randy, or are you just standing there stoically staring at my?
No. I totally agree.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
Listen, it's my face. I have a good looking face.
He was lost in your eyes.
I know. That's what I'm saying. No. So the other thing to talk about with that as well, and I think let's just play off of that scenario that Randy was just describing about how they had elk that were moving up this hill. The other thing to remember, and again, I don't know why when I first learned about this, I guess part of it was just being a Midwestern guy and being from North Iowa, which is flatter than a pancake. You know, our biggest hill here is an overpass, so we just don't have this. But what thermals do throughout the day plays a big part in how elk move, okay? So the best way to describe it is thermals is just the movement of the air up and down the hill depending on the heat, depending on the sun. So in the night, in the evening, throughout the night, and first thing in the morning, the thermals will inherently blow down. Okay? So when the air cools or the sun goes down, the thermals will blow down the hill. So in the evening, the thermals will start blowing down. All through the night, they'll blow down. Right away in the morning, they'll blow down. The air is cooler. So it's blowing down, it's blowing down, it's blowing down. So, and then during the day, it blows all of a sudden, as soon as that sun comes up over the hill, and it hits a ridge, or just when that just starts to heat up, the thermal just switches and it just goes racing back up the hill. It rises. So it's either falling or rising. So what will happen is elk want to try to be where they can use that thermal to get that kind of wind in their face. So what they'll do in the morning is they will work up the ridge. A lot of times in the middle of the night, they'll just kind of do whatever they want because it's the middle of the night. They still have predators naturally. There's stuff out there that they're instinctively going to watch out for. But in the mornings, early in the morning, the elk will naturally try to go back up the ridge because they've got that thermal blowing down so they can smell what they're running into. And then it's crazy how they end up doing it, but they get up to where they want to go. They bed down, and then all of a sudden now they're up here, and then the thermal switches. All that air just blows right to them. So it's like, when I first figured out, I'm like, well, how am I supposed to ever get to them? It's like they use a thermal to get in front of me, and then they're using it so they can smell it, and then they get up there, and then they can just smell everything come right to them. Like, how am I ever going to find them? But what you have to try to do is you can use that thermal to your advantage, knowing that it's rising and falling like that, and that elk are actually going to go up to where they want to try to bed using the thermal. So say this is the ridge, and they're moving over here, you can side hill to the right or to the left of them, and then try to get on their same elevation and then work towards them. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you're working into them. Then when you work into them, when you start calling, the other thing to remember, and I'm kind of putting a couple things in here, we're talking about thermals, but then we're also going to talk about how inherently a bull or a cow, when you start calling at them or using some sort of decoy the way they can see, if you're moving across a ridge with the thermals going up, that bull, when he hears you, he's going to inherently go on the downwind side, which means in the morning, he's going to inherently try to go above you. So then you have to start playing that game that, okay, if I'm cow calling, when he comes in, he's going to try to go above me to get that wind. Does that make sense? Yeah. So then you can start, and this is where I think Randy really gets into it. And this is what I think you're going to be like, yeah, that's what I love the most, is when you start calling, you start thinking, okay, this is where I'm calling. He's going to inherently go above where I am right now. So I'm going to call, and then I'm going to move. So I position myself so when he comes to that call, I can get my shooter a broadside shot. Or if you're solo hunting, I can call, move. So when he comes above, I'm right here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
And then it really becomes this super fun cat and mouse game.
Yeah.
Yep. So trying to figure out where to put your shooter. Mm-hmm. I mean, I understand where the elk are probably going to come from.
Yep.
But it's okay. At 6:30, the thermals are doing this. At about 6:45 to 7, they're going to start doing this. Yeah. Like when we'd go to the killing field.
Yep.
The time I took you there and you had that encounter with the bear.
Yeah.
multiple different encounters with bears.
Yeah, which encounter? yeah.
And Cole was the only guy that wasn't packing.
Yeah, I didn't have no. Which is funny because
Yeah,
I'm
bear
not.
spray.
I'm not afraid of bears, but I respect bears. It's kind of like heights. I'm not afraid of heights, but I don't want to fall.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, you know, like, hey bear, nice to see you. Let's just keep our respectable distance from each other. And the bears that we saw just decided like, hey, I want to walk right where you are. So yeah, they just kind of decided to come right to me. But
Yep.
But yeah, no, that's absolutely it. I mean, you have to understand what the thermals are doing, rising and falling, and then understand that an elk inherently is going to circle on the downwind side, and you can use that to your advantage. And it also just really helps to understand, like, well, why are the elk up there? Well, they're up there because the thermal's rising during the day and they're smelling everything.
So, with everything I've heard so far, obviously I've never been elk hunting before.
Yep.
I'm super interested in the calling aspect. Just kind of losing
It's
my
okay.
voice.
It's okay. It's all right. You sound no, I'm just kidding.
But so what I'm kind of gathering right now is like, as a caller, is there ever a time where you should be calling from the same spot? Because I mean, before you said typically when you hear a bugle or something, they're moving, or a mew, they're moving.
Well,
and then also like they're going to be moving, you know, downwind of you, so you're going to try and kind of beat that bull. Is there ever a time where you should be bugling from the same spot? I mean, maybe when you're trying to locate them or whatnot, but that's kind of something that I've been thinking about as you guys have been talking.
Yeah, I mean, from my
I've called them in. I've called them in to myself from one spot.
Yep.
And in fact, that happened last year when I killed my bull because I did it from a tree. And I played a great game. I mean, it was one of those, and I've had probably over a 20-some year career, I've had just a handful of magical moments. And one of those magical moments was this last year. I'm sitting at my machine in the dark, putting my pack on, get my headlamp on, flick the red, and all of a sudden, from up here is a bull, then another one fires off, and another one fires off from the backside of the hill. And I went, here we go. So, I mean, I took my little heavy set body and I trucked it as fast as I could because I knew right where they were coming. Mm-hmm. And I just got up to the top as fast as I could, stopped, caught my breath. They're bugling. And I'm like, should I get in my tree? Should I stay on the ground? I'm all by myself. And I've been in situations before where being on the ground, there's a lot of, when you're by yourself, it's tough. I mean, it's almost impossible. So I'm like, I'm going to take my chances. That's why I hung this tree stand. So I get up in that tree stand. I've got a bull looking out in front of me. I've got a bull to the right that has cows, and he's in this meadow and he's bugling and the cows are mewing. And then out in front of me on the backside of the hill is another bull bugling, and he's coming up. And then I've got one off to my left that was bugling with this bull. Mm-hmm. So I instinctively knew herd bull, satellite.
Yep.
And I started hyperlipping and sweet talking and everything I could do. And that bull would run across that meadow. And then there was like a hedgerow and he wouldn't come through it. And he'd turn around, go back to his cows. The other two bulls, bugle. He'd bugle. But then he moved off to what would be the east of me, farther to my right. And I'm like, there's no way. So I've got to concentrate on these two. Well, the one to my left just shut it down. He didn't want to play the game anymore. So I had the one in front of me, and I could hear him breaking stuff. And I could pick up little flashes of brown, probably 100 yards back into the woods. And of course, my mind is clicking. Okay, what do I do? How do I entice him? Okay, that didn't work. So I just did a few cow calls, and then I'm like, I'm not doing another thing for 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And that bull could have veered off and gone with the herd bull as a satellite, but I just took the chances. So I waited about 5 minutes, and I just went, just real excited. Mm-hmm. And then I reached around the backside of that tree, and I did leaving bugle, like gather up, we're out of here.
Yep.
But it was young. Like I was a spike and I stole a cow. As soon as I did that, that bull came on a dead run. I mean, he was breaking stuff and I could see him coming. I'm like, oh, here we go. And he came right to the edge and he stood there and there was a pine limb and he's looking up, down, and I'm 40 yards away up in this tree and I'm in a full draw and I'm waiting. And he took a turn the right direction, which is luck. I had nothing to do with that, but he turned the right way, took 3 steps, came perfectly broadside, and I just nailed him.
Yeah.
And it, that was 20 some years of experience that all came together. If I would have made a different call, it may not have worked. If I would have sounded more aggressive, he probably never would have came in, but he saw an opportunity. Hey, there's a young bull over there that just stole a cow and he's leaving a different direction than the herd bull. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to try to steal that cow. Mm-hmm. So it's all the game that you play, and it's also being in the right place at the right time. Yeah.
It is turkey hunting but like 800 pounds heavier.
Well, and that's
it is. That's
like, what I've been thinking about this whole time. Cause I mean, like I became kind of obsessed with the calling aspect. I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
Being with Cole this spring. Yep. And now talking like this, it's like, oh my gosh, here we go again.
Well, to my perspective on that question too would be, when can I just stay in one spot? It seems like a good time to stay in one spot is if you can get in front of them, knowing that this is where they want to go. Like he's describing, Randy's got tree stands set that are in front of where they want to go, right? He's hoping that they're below and they're moving up this ridge.
Yep.
And then they're going to kind of come across, so they're not going to get his thermal, right? And then that's where they want to be, and they want to kind of dump off or go right in there into dark timber.
Yeah.
So that can work. Or if you're down like in a meadow in the evening where you're like, okay, I know the elk are up here or they're up over here and they're going to drop down, they're going to come across, or they're going to probably come when the thermal's still in their face, but it's going to, or it's, it's still in their face, but it's going to switch and they're going to want to come down this water. That's when it's good to be, you could be on there and you could be like, hey, I'm a cow that's on here first. Where's everybody at? Or I'm a lone bull, just a low key bugle. Hey, I'm here. Where's everybody else at? And then all of a sudden one will pop off and you're like, okay, here's where we are. That's where they are. What do we want to do?
Yeah.
So but then again, then you start moving again. You know what I mean?
So what I wanted to tell you guys was what you were discussing right there. I mean, there are times, for me personally, there are times where I want to run and gun.
Yeah.
But I just know that I've stumbled across something that works. And it's like, why reinvent the wheel? But I've also learned from all the work that I do before the season starts, I've learned that in the evening, like you talked about, the elk are moving back down. So when I sit on the very top of a ridge, I'm just sitting there. And so anyway, for me, this year will be the first year that I will sit in the tree stand in the morning and then I will chase them in the evening. I'll locate them. So,
well, now so like to your point, Randy, another thing I was going to say with that is there's so many ways to do this, right?
Yeah.
Like you can run and gun, you can chase them, you can sit in tree stands. There's just so many little things that can kind of dictate what you do. And I think what you do just has to come based on experience. If you don't have experience, that gets a little tricky. Hopefully this type of information is trying to help you. There's a lot of stuff out there. The other thing that I would say is a great example of where all of a sudden plans need to change. Let's say that Randy's got a tree stand set over a wallow. Okay. He's got it set over a wallow. Mm-hmm. And he's had it set over that wallow. He doesn't have a camera on it, but he went out there in July and he set this camera on a wallow that's up towards the top. So he's like, oh, this is probably where they're going, or they're probably going to come through here. The first morning we go into that wallow and we set that tree stand for, let's say, from 6 to noon. And we're sitting in tree stand and I'm looking down at the wallow, and the wallow is clear as a bell. The water is clear. I can see every little rock in the bottom of it, every little blade of grass sticking up through it. When we get back to camp, I'm probably going to tell Randy, hey, I don't know if we should probably set that again. Well, the reason is because they haven't been hitting the wallow.
Yeah.
Because if it's a hit wallow,
Muddy.
it either looks like water or it looks like chocolate milk.
Yeah.
And if it's chocolate milk, okay, something's been in here stirring this up.
Yeah.
But if that water is clear as a bell and you look like you could like cup your hand and drink it, there's probably not elk in there.
Yeah.
So then that's all of a sudden a thing where it's like, say you were going on an elk hunt and you were like, man, I've got this tree stand set over this wallow, and that's where I'm going to be, and I'm going to sit there for 5 days, morning to night. May an elk come in there? Maybe it will, but however many days before that, there hasn't been an elk in there because that wallow, there's no fresh tracks around it. The water's clear as a bell. It's not stirred up.
Yep.
That might be conducive to doing something else besides sitting in a tree stand. Maybe that's when you need to go try and locate bugle.
Yeah.
Up on a ridge line in the morning and try to figure out if you can hear where the elk are. You do that and all of a sudden go, well, dang, they're the elk that I'm trying after. They just so happen to be 3/4 of a mile that way. They're not over here right now.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Maybe you check that wallow day 3 or day 4 and all of a sudden it's chocolate milk. Okay, booyah, I need to get back in here and I need to sit down and I need to wait because obviously there's been something in here and hopefully it'll come back.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Yep. And one thing that I wanted to share during this podcast, and I know we're probably running up on the end of it, but is for me, when I met you and you explained ozonics to me, and call this a shameless plug, but I think Western hunters are missing a golden opportunity. I mean, I spray my clothes. My boots have never touched asphalt. They've only touched that mountain. That's the only time I wear those boots. I shower. I don't put any scent in my beard. I mean, I go strictly as scent free as possible. But this thing is the biggest exhaust pipe of human odor.
Yes.
And what do you do about that? Our old timers used to take an apple, and I still take an apple out in the woods with me because I'm refreshing, trying to clean my mouth out. Well, when I met you and I learned about ozonics, I was like, and I whitetail hunt up north, so I could see the value. Oh, whitetail, okay. And it worked. I took it up whitetail hunting, and I'm scared of heights. I'll be the first to admit it. My tree stands are usually, well, let's see, an elk rack. Their elk rack is about this tall, so that's about as tall as I go.
If Randy stood on the chair that he was sitting right now, he'd get a little queasy. Yeah, he just doesn't. He doesn't like heights. Like it was an accomplishment for him to get that elk and that mountain light up on that wall. He might, he just doesn't like heights. He's not a big height guy.
No, I'm not a big fan of heights. So, well, in fact, on a hillside like this, where you're only 10 feet off the ground on this side, but on this side, you're 20 some feet off the ground. That's no bueno for me, man. No thanks. No thanks. So anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but the ozonics unit. So I used it, and the highest I could, the only tree I could find whitetail hunting, I could get high enough and I felt safe enough, but I was parallel with the trail that the whitetail were using.
Yeah.
And my wind was, it was blowing right to them. And I had that ozonics unit running, and here come the deer in the morning, and they walked right through. None of them smelt me. I was like, okay. So I applied that with my thinking brain. I'm like, would that work for elk hunting? So I purchased one of your kinetic packs because, and I don't wear it on my back. I actually adhere it to my pack frame because I usually carry a pack frame with me because you never know where you're going to be. You get an elk down. I don't want to have to lug all the way back and then come all the way back in. I want to be there so I can carry something out first trip. So I have that ozonics unit running in my kinetic pack, which is attached to my pack frame. And that thing gets turned on the minute I leave my machine, up the mountain, up the tree, in the tree till about noon or 1. And then it's running all the way back out. And last year I had a spike come in and the winds on the top of a ridge are this way, that way, that way, this way, this way, this way.
Yeah.
And I had that unit running. That spike came in, and he fed, and he turned right and stood at the base of my tree. Stood right there. I could hear him chewing cud and breathing. And he was right, because I'm only about, at the most, 12 feet off the ground, maybe 10.
It's 8 feet, but no, I'm just kidding.
No way. It was at least 10. But he was right underneath me, and I know he should have smelled me.
Yeah.
So the benefits, to me, that was the final piece of the scent puzzle. So it gives me that much more opportunity, because all of the expense, the going up early season, hauling, it's about 3 hours away from here, being away from my family, the time that I put in, I want every advantage that I can get.
Yep.
And I think as a Western hunter, more Western hunters need to look into this unit. Now I have the Orion, and then I also now have the 500. And for me, I have noticed a difference in the sound quality of the fan, but either one, it doesn't matter for me. I've never had any animals spook from it, but it's just that much more of a game changer, and it's well worth the investment. At least it was for me. I've seen the results. So.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, we talk about that a lot with when it comes to whitetails, maximize opportunity. And I feel like on an elk hunt, for most guys from the Midwest that aren't from, Idaho or wherever, it's a trip. I mean, it's an expense. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. Even with Randy being from Idaho, it's not like it's just 30 minutes away. It's 3 hours away each way.
Right.
And so, like you said, I've kind of talked about this till it sounds like a broken record, but as a hunting guide in Colorado, I looked at Ozonics as a way that I could help maximize opportunity. It was going to get clients more opportunity, because when I got elk on the downwind side, it gave us a fighting chance, because when we got elk on the downwind side before, they winded us, whether that was in a tree stand or chasing, you just weren't going to get away with it.
Yeah.
And with an Ozonics, it gave us more opportunity. It allowed us to see more elk. First time I hunted with Scott Elrod, I mean, we put it to the test. I'm like, all right, fine, let's do it. Just put them in a ground blind. Elk should not come on that water hole in the evening. And then here they all piled out. It was crazy. And that's the way I used it. And guys would come and they'd be like, and just like I said to Scott, I'm like, Scott, it's not going to work in an elk. They've got bigger eyes, bigger ears, bigger nose. Yeah. It's not going to work on an elk. And it does. And honestly, in a Western state as well, a lot of what people don't think about as well with that, getting a little bit deeper into that, is the fact that in Iowa, here we've got 70, 80% humidity every day. Yeah. That's just the way it is. We have a lot of humidity in the air, a lot of moisture in the air. When you're in Western states, there's hardly any humidity.
Right.
It's just a lot drier. So there's that much less moisture stuff in the air from a molecular level that ozone is going to oxidize on more of your odor. It's not 80% humidity. Right. It's 5% humidity, 10% humidity. It's just so much less. But yeah, like you said, go ahead.
Well, and the other thing real quick is, like, when I put my shooter out in front of me, this is what used to happen. I'd put my shooter out in front of me. I played the wind. Everything's right. I'm calling the bull in. The bull comes in. Shooter does not have an opportunity, right? The bull is still circling. Mm-hmm. The bull would circle right into my wind, and It was game over. Now, the bull comes in. Shooter does not have an opportunity. He'll circle, and he'll go right back out the same way he came in, giving my shooter another opportunity. It still may not be successful, but the real beauty of it is that bull is still in that drainage. Yes. We didn't blow him out 4 drainages away. And that evening or in the morning, we can go back and hunt that bull because I know he's still there. Mm-hmm. We didn't blow him out. So that was a big deal, because part of the elk hunting experience is locating them.
Yes.
Elk are where elk are, and you got to find them. And once you find them, you don't want to blow them out.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, anyway. That's 100% right. I mean, we would try to be very coy with clients about that. And the fact of, like, we're in Colorado, we were hunting a lot of leased land, but we hunted national forests as well. But when you find elk, they are where they are. But man, if you bump them, sayonara. Yeah. They're not running 500, 600 yards. They're going to run 4 miles. They're going to go up, down, up, down, up, down, and then stop. You're never going to see them again. They are Gandhi. And so
Right.
you're trying to do everything you can. It's such a funny thing because I always told clients, imagine a herd of elk is like a bubble. We're trying to kind of like nudge up against the bubble, but we don't want to pop the bubble. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We want to get in there, and if we can try to shoot an elk in the bubble, that's great. But we don't want to like go in there and pop the bubble, because if we pop it, well, guess what? We're not at step 5. We're back at step 0, which is find them again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's where,
Yep.
again, if we can use ozonics to help eliminate our odors so we don't put as much pressure on that bubble, the better off you're going to be. Yep. So the other thing I want to jump back to just quickly, the two other things I wanted to say for people that might not know that I think this is, and Randy, you're going to go, oh yeah, that's so important. And I never really knew this at all before, was we started talking about moon. Okay. There's a lot of discussion about moon phase and how that affects animals' behavior and rut and this and that. But what you can definitely count on when it comes to moon phase is on a full moon is just big and full and high in the sky. What generally is going to happen is you're going to see, and what elk are going to do is they are going to naturally, they're going to move and do a lot more at night. Think about the moon like, what's that?
They gather.
Yep, they gather. They're naturally going to be out there. They're going to gather up. They're going to herd up. And it's almost like they're just throwing a party, right? Because the moon's high and there's a lot of light and they can see and they just gather together. So generally what happens on a full moon is it's funny because it's a very short window, can feel like a very short window of opportunity right at first light and right at last light. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Because they'll be moving all night long. And so in the morning, they're getting, well, right when the sun comes up, they're getting ready to go to bed. It's almost like if they were at a rave all night. It's like 5 a.m. You're like, man, holy crap, I haven't gone to bed yet, And then they're like, sun's coming up, and they're going back to bed.
Yeah.
And so it can be a very short window of time. Sometimes on a full moon, the middle of the day can be very productive in the fact of they'll bed down really early, but then they're going to want to at some point get up and get water so you can make on a move on them.
Yeah.
The flip of that coin is if it's no moon, generally on a no moon, it's a lot darker. And so you might see more activity longer in the morning, longer in the evening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because it's not so bright during the night that they're getting done with the night and they're ready to go to bed right away. And then the other thing I was going to mention, I'm kind of jumping around here, but to your point earlier about when you're getting elk trying to come in on you and you're trying to get a shot at them, one of the things I always told clients to remember, and this, I learned this from experience, was a lot of times what'll happen is if like say Randy's calling for me and I'm here and that bull comes in and I'm at full draw and I try to get a shot and all of a sudden he pegs me. A lot of times they'll stop and they'll just look, you know what I mean? It seems like it's always one of two reactions. They'll just stop and just look right at you, or as soon as they see you, they'll break. But a lot of times if they break, they'll stop again. They'll break and they'll run 10, 20, 30 yards. They'll stop and they'll look back. And just remember that you have that opportunity. I can't tell you how many times I had clients where they would be at full draw and that bull would finally, like, he would catch them drawing or we'd see them and he would break and they would just let their boat on like, oh, they're all disappointed. Well, during that frustration moment, he ran out 20 yards, stopped and turned and looked back. Well, a lot of times you're going to get that nice quartering away shot where he's looking back at you like, what was that? I feel like I'm a little farther away from that danger. So just if he breaks on you, get ready because he may stop. A lot of times they're not just going to break and just run out of the county right at first. Yeah. After they stop, then they run, then they're gone. But you can get them to stop and you may get that second opportunity. Yeah. So be ready for that.
And sometimes I'm not where I can see the shooter.
Yes.
So I would really love it if the shooter learns how to use a mouth read.
Mm-hmm.
And he has that mouth read in his mouth, because I've had situations. Amen, I mean, Matthew's called for me. I've had a bull walk. I was on my knee and the only place I could find a good spot to set up was literally a foot off this game trail.
Yep.
And I thought, there is no way this elk's walking down this game trail. And sure enough, that's right where he walked. And I was on a knee like this, and I could see his leg right at the end of my arrow. And I knew his head was right here. I couldn't see it. And he was literally a foot in front of my arrow. And he stopped, and I'm trying to control my breathing. And then I went like that. And as soon as I did that, his legs went,
yeah.
And I knew he was going to spin and throw dirt all over me, and that's just what he did.
Yep.
He spun around and launched, and I came to a full draw, and I just went, and he turned broadside at 25 yards.
Telling you.
And I let it go. But I had held my bow out in front of me for so long, I should have rested it on the ground. But I was holding it like this, that I drew, he turned, and I dropped my bow arm.
Oh.
And my arrow went just right under him.
Yeah.
But yet that call, if I wouldn't have, he may have stopped, but it might have been another 20, 30 yards.
Yep.
But all of a sudden something spooked him, but he didn't know what it was. And I've had other opportunities where a bull has come in looking directly at me. He just, okay, I should see cows. I don't see cows. I don't like this. And you can tell their body language that they've had enough. So they'll swing their head to turn to leave.
Yep.
I use that opportunity when they turn their head, because now they can't see me. I draw. They start walking out or trotting, and I just, and whoop, quartering away shot, send it in. Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty. That's the fun of it.
Yeah.
So
the two things I would say to that as well is, and I had this a lot of times with clients, it seems very simple, but I would explain this to people is, and I would usually not say it till after we've set up once and I could kind of see what you don't want to do if you're first going elk hunting is you get out there and Randy sets me up and then he goes back and then I just stand there. I just stand there for 20 minutes just looking around. What you should be doing, you should get out your rangefinder and you should range every single tree, 20, 30, 40, there's 70, 50. And literally I would tell guys when I would see him not do anything, we would get back to like, hey man, listen, I would be great if you had to get an extra battery for your rangefinder because you should be ranging like 50 times every time we stop and memorize and go through it and go, okay, there's 20, 30, 40, there's 50, that's 70, that Ponderosa's 80, and just go through it. Because then when that situation happens, you're not having to sit here and it's already enough going on, right? Like if you shoot a single pin sight, you're moving everything, you got a lot going, you're creating a lot of movement. But if you know that you can draw back when he turns or he breaks, or if you get caught drawing or whatever, or he's just passing through, you go, oh yeah, that tree's 20, that tree's 30, he's at 24, boom. And you can make that shot. Because I think so many times you just kind of stand there and it is fun to enjoy the moment, but man, use that time to get some ranges so you can see what's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Right. And yeah. And the other thing is, like I had a cousin and his wife come out from Ohio and I'd set them up and then I'd move back off to one side and I'd start calling and they stood there perfectly frozen.
Yeah.
Like they were whitetail hunting. And I'm like, you can move, you can look around and if the bull comes in, then he goes behind a bunch of trees. If you need to step out because that's your shooting opportunity. And from here you don't, but here you do.
Yep.
Make that move because just like, well, I guess in some ways it's like whitetail hunting, but you're never going to kill them if you don't let one go or don't. Yeah. Like I've rushed bulls before. I've had a bull rake in a tree 70 yards away. I can hear him. He's just mad, but he is not moving. Then as soon as he starts raking a tree,
go.
I mean, I am moving as fast as I can. I will become aggressive. And if it doesn't work out, at least I tried it.
Yeah.
It's doing me no good to stand here and just have a conversation for an hour with the guy. I'm going to try to make something happen.
Yes. Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I think, and again, inherently, if you're going on an elk hunt and you've only got so many days, if you can hunt the whole season, you can be a little more passive. You can kind of not roll the dice. But if you're only there for a short time, you need to roll it. So if you're in a thick of brush and that bull's walking through, and you've already known that looking ahead, like, okay, there's a little opening here. If you need to move. The other thing I would say is get used to drawing fast. I mean, right, Randy, like how many times will an elk be walking through and all of a sudden you'll have maybe like 2 or 3 Ponderosas lined up, or you'll have a pinion that he walks behind. You can't just do your whole, you're at the range and you're like, oh, it's 6 yards and I do my whole draw real nice and settle in. No, it's like a boom. You know what I mean? Like you draw it as fast as you can.
Yeah.
Because when he steps back out, he's going to see you again. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So try to draw fast. And again, don't be afraid if you have, or even if you have to draw and you don't have a little bit of an opening, if you do have to, you just kind of go for broke. Maybe you do have to take one step forward and just give you that little extra, to see. The other thing, Randy, that I would say, I've mentioned this through this conversation, is it is nice to tuck back into brush, but be careful too.
Yes.
Don't get so back in the brush that all of a sudden you've got like a branch going like through your riser, you know what I mean? Or something that sounds silly, but it's happened to me. I've had it where I've had a branch coming, like I've tucked back in a minute hurry and all of a sudden a branch goes thump and I'm like, I can't do that. You know what I mean? Like it's like literally right through the middle of my string. I'm like, so I'm like clicking off and I'm trying to break stuff. So you have to be, there's a fine line besides you want to be against your tree, but you want to be like in the tree. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Here's a good example. It was probably the second year I had ever elk hunted. And this guy that I learned from, his name is Clay, and he was an extraordinary caller, and he knew what those elk were doing. So he had this bull just hot. I mean, he goes, this bull's going to come in. So we get down to the spot, and he goes, Randy, get right there. And he had his cousin, I think, out with him. He goes, you get over there. So I knew enough from reading that I got in front of this bush. But if I had to, I could swing either direction and pivot with my foot, especially shooting to the right. Mm-hmm. And I had a great backdrop, and I blended in, but I was up far enough in front so I could move.
Yes.
I looked over, and his cousin, there were about 7 dead little like pine trees. They were dead. He got right in the middle of them. He was breaking stuff to get in the middle of these dead trees. And I'm like, there is nothing he's going to be able to do.
Yeah, he can't move at all.
Any movement, he was going to break a bunch of branches. And I looked back at Clay, and Clay went like this.
Yeah.
So Clay bugles, and that bull just charges. And he comes flying out into that opening. He's looking around, and we're both standing there like this, and I should have drawn. But he turned, and he's coming broadside in front of me, not in front of his cousin.
Yeah.
And I had one tree that I could draw on, and I was getting ready, and his cousin turned and broke a bunch of sticks. Bull was gone. Yeah. And Clay took his bugle, slammed it to the ground, said a bunch of words that I'm not going to say here, picked up his bugle, and started marching back up like a mile and a half, 2 miles to the machine. And I didn't know where we were. So I just gathered my stuff up and I just followed Clay because I'm like, I'm going to get lost. I mean, if he leaves me, I'm going to be lost. So anyway, that's a good example of look at your surroundings in front of you. Give yourself every shooting opportunity that you can.
Yep.
Use your backdrop behind you. Mm-hmm. And we talked way earlier, as long as you don't move, I've had elk walk 5 yards right in front of me.
You. Yeah. And sometimes too with it, like when I would guide, and even when I was out with Randy the last time, I mean, it's even applicable when I've gone moose hunting. Sometimes you just can't find like the perfect spot. You just have to make do. Yeah. You're like, okay, here we are. The main thing is can I get, so I can break my outline up? Can I back up into something? Can I swing and get a shot? Yeah. Do I have perfect openings every time? No. And there was a lot of times that I would be like, well, this is what it's going to have to be. And you set up and then you move and you set up again. And, you just have to do the best you can. Sometimes you don't have all the greatest openings. And sometimes that can be the problem, right? And I used to do this as a young elk hunter, is I would look for like the perfect setup and I would move and move and move and move and move and move. Well, all of a sudden I'd gone a lot farther than I probably should have. And I hadn't really done, much calling or anything. I was just trying to find the right spot, and I was wasting a lot of time when there was elk coming my way. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yep. One thing I would like to share with you guys is when you go out west, normally a black bear, I mean, I've walked around a bush and I've had a black bear right there. Mm-hmm. And they realize what I am, and they usually turn and run. But there are times, like when Cole was out, the place where we're at is we can send text messages to each other, right?
Yeah.
So it'd be like, hey, are you seeing anything? And then bing, your phone would vibrate. Well, my phone was on silent, and I'm back calling, and I'm cow calling, and I'm hyper lipping, and I'm calf calling. Then I really did a bunch of calf calls, like a lost calf. Well, a big brown cinnamon colored black bear, Cole must have saw it first.
Yeah, I'm sitting there, and we're in this nice little meadow. It's like kind of a narrow meadow, and I'm set up this way, and then Randy's behind me, and then Matthew's off to like my back behind me to my left, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, I think you had that little seat, tree seat thing, right?
Yeah, hammock seat.
Yeah, hammock seat. I was in this little hammock seat, and it was a beautiful afternoon. We're just kind of sitting there, and it was like towards the evening, and it was a great sequence. You could tell he was like cow calling, and then he kind of started to sound like a lost calf, like, okay, they started to move off, and she was kind of by herself. Well, I'm just kind of looking, and I looked to my right, and I was like, whoa, hey. And it was a great looking black bear, dark cinnamon colored black bear, and it was big. And he was lumbering in, and you could tell he didn't have a care in the world. I mean, not a care. And I didn't have a black bear tag, but I mean, he was like, oh, baby. And he kind of came my way, and then you could tell he was, right when he started to call again, he turned and was like, okay, that's the way that I want to go. You go ahead and pick it up from there.
So I didn't realize, but Cole sent me a text, bear coming your way. And then Matthew saw the same bear, and he sent another text, bear coming your way. Well, I'm down there breaking branches. My 40 pistol, my semi-auto, is on my pack, which was 15 yards away from me, because I'm walking all over the place, breaking stuff and cow calling. Well, all of a sudden I see this dark set of brown legs walking under the tree line, under the branches. I'm like, oh, geez. So I put my release on, and then I'm looking, and I'm like, those dark legs that could have been an elk are awful close together for an elk.
Yeah.
And then the light bulb went off. That's a bear. And he came flying around that pine tree. He was going to kill a cow elk. And he's eating real estate. And I look over at my pack, and I look back at the bear, and I just went, "Aah!" and he veered off. And then all of a sudden I hear all the chuckles, just like right now, up on the hillside. Oh, yeah, real funny, guys.
Yeah.
Well,
it was funny too, because I always live and die by this, and the motto is, don't do anything stupid. It's actually a really good motto.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, if you're in a situation, just ask yourself, is this stupid? Because if it's stupid, probably shouldn't be doing it, right?
Right.
And that's actually done me pretty well in a lot of different places. Alaska, Idaho, Colorado, Iowa. Is this stupid? Am I too high in this tree? Is this stupid? Yeah, this is stupid. This is stupid. So then the black bear charges him. And it was kind of funny, but like we get back down there, and you could tell Randy was like, the adrenaline's pumping, and he's like kind of excited, but it's like kind of nerve-wracking. And you could hear the bear still like in the brush breaking stuff. Like he was right there, and now it's dark. So I get back down to Randy, and I don't have a gun. So I'm not generally scared of black bears, but I respect them. So I look at Randy, I was like, all right. The motto is, don't do anything stupid. Where's your guys' handguns? And Randy's like, oh yeah, my pack. So I'm like, take your handgun out, point it that way, and let's go. Like, this is stupid. This is stupid. We are in the middle of the stupid. We got to get out of the stupid here. Let's go. And you could tell Randy was like, yeah, I probably should get out of here. And it was a heck of a black bear. I mean, that was a macho man black bear.
Yeah. He was a big bear, and there's a lot of bears up there.
Yeah.
That unit used to be a draw only unit. And then that's where they bring the troubled bears that they catch getting into people's garbage cans. They drop them in that unit. So it's just overpopulated. So you run into a lot of bears. I mean, how many bear encounters did you have while you were out there?
Yeah. I mean, it was that one with you that one day. We had that one that day. And then we had the one on that kill meadow that wanted to walk right up to me with the cub. And then Matthew and I saw a sow with 2 cubs. And then I saw one more.
On a carcass.
On a carcass. And then I saw one more after that. And then, of course, just like how I would end up doing it, I pulled a Nick Simon hot mess moment. We're on this kill meadow, and I was like off the meadow, kind of in this thick stuff, and I'm sitting there, and I look over, and I'm like, oh, there's a black bear with a cub, and sow, it's walking right to me. I'm like, oh, great. So it gets like 15 yards away, and it finally like kind of stops and is looking, is like, oh, you're not right. Well, it just kind of like, you know how they do, they kind of take a side step, and they kind of turn, and then they just she kind of like galloped off a little bit. But she had to have been like pretty close, it felt like. Well, then it gets dark. I walk back out to the meadow, and I'm like, my imagination's going crazy. I get back to the meadow, and I forgot my flashlight, my headlamp. I had set it beside me. I'm like, oh. I looked here, and I was like, I forgot my headlamp. He's like, you did? I'm like, yeah. He goes, and I'm like, I got to go back and get it. Well, now I have to walk back down in there without a light. And they're like, and my imagination's going, black bear's gonna maul you, black bear's gonna maul you, black bear's gonna maul you. It was probably already like up at the top of the ridge, but it just made me it was a little nerve wracking. But the moral of the story is when you go out hunting in Western State, if you have the opportunity, you can get extra tags, get them, because you just never know what you might see, and you might not be there to shoot a black bear, but it's just funny how it works out that way.
Right.
You know, you might have an opportunity to shoot a black bear, you might have an opportunity to shoot a mule deer. You never know.
Yeah.
No, it's pretty cool. And I think that's what's really fun too. We can briefly discuss this. That's what's so nice about, Western states is there is a lot of public hunting opportunity. There's a lot of public ground. But there's a lot of public ground, but I will say also with elk hunting right now, and it's been this way for a while, but, there's just kind of different segments of what type of, I don't know what, if you'd say, let me start over. So that's the nice thing about public land as well is there's a lot of public land in Western states, but it also is kind of broken up into different segments in the fact of when you look at Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, there's a lot of over-the-counter hunting opportunities. You can drive to that state or buy that tag before season, and you can go out there and get on public ground and hunt. But then there's also states like New Mexico where it's a lottery system, meaning that every year you can put in and you may have an opportunity to draw a pretty coveted tag. But then there's also states like Utah, Colorado, certain zones of Colorado is this way. Arizona is a lot this way where you have to put in year after year and try to draw and have so many points. So, you know, it's pretty awesome because whether you're going if you're just looking to try to shoot an elk or if you're going out there trying to shoot a 380-inch bull, depending on what state you're going to, there's a lot of different opportunities and ways to hunt. I like the over-the-counter idea. You know what I mean? I don't like the preference points putting in all that rigmarole. So I naturally gravitate towards Colorado. It's worked out good that Randy's from Idaho. You know what I mean? And it is an over-the-counter tag. Some states like Idaho are doing an in-between where it's over-the-counter, but it's limited. They only allow so many. And so you've got to be pretty diligent about making sure that you get your tag when you get it, because if you don't, you're going to miss it. But I do enjoy the fact that there is just so much national forest and public land that you can go on and have the opportunity to harvest an elk. It's pretty sweet.
Well, and the fact that Idaho is still one of the last over-the-counter tags, but they give an allotment of 12,500 elk tags.
Yep.
And it wasn't 10 years ago, as a resident, any leftover non-resident tags we could purchase.
Oh, really?
And they allow out of that 12,500 so many non-resident tags.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I can remember there were tags and it was like, no, I'm good. One elk is sufficient.
Yep.
Well, now today, this last year, so many people, there's only so much allotment for non-resident. And like in the unit you're going to come hunt, there's 400 and I believe 30 tags available for non-residents.
Yep.
And they go on sale on a certain date, and within hours they're gone. All of the non-resident tags are gone. So if you snooze, you lose. And eventually, it's my feeling what's going to happen is Idaho's going to have to go to some type of draw
Mm-hmm.
for non-residents, because unless you're lucky and get an early number, if you're number 18,000 in the queue, you might as well hang up.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, that you're the odds of you getting the tag that you want for the unit you want
so
isn't
small.
going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's hitting the nail on the head there. I mean, this year was a perfect example. When I went out elk hunted with Randy back in 2019, I did exactly what we said. Hey, it's on this date at this time. You need to create an account on their website, and then there's a queue that you can get into on their website, and then they'll give you an assigned number, and then that assigned number is that's what you are in line, and when it comes up, you need to make sure you press in exactly these numbers for this unit, and then you'll get it. If you don't do it that day, you probably won't get it. You maybe do it the next day or the day after that, maybe you'll get it. But it's you just got to be kind of Johnny on the spot. It's like, okay. This year, what was it? 38,000 people or 48,000? It was some huge number that were trying to buy non-resident tags. So then I got on their website. Well, there were so many people, it crashed their website. And then it was supposed to start at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Well, then all of a sudden it was 10:30 Mountain Time. Their website still wasn't up. Then it was like 11. Then they had to put a ban on the website. We're working on this. We're trying to fix it. Finally, they got it up and running. Dude, after they got it up and running, I finally, and I'm sitting here just like everybody else around the country, refresh. I'm just refresh. Come on. Let's go. You know, and I'm like, I'm causing the problem just like everybody else is. We're like, come on. I got in. I was 921 out of 38,000. Randy had another friend that was doing it, and he was 28,000 or 18,000 or something. He was way up there doing the same thing I was doing, and I just so happened. And if I would have been 15,000 or whatever, when I bought that tag, there was 121 left when I bought it, and I was 900 in line. So by the time it got to the 20, 30,000s, you weren't even going to be able to go. You don't even have the opportunity. Now there's other times throughout the year when people turn their tags back in and they resell them. And so you may have an opportunity that way, but it's definitely gotten a lot harder. Yeah. And I think that is a representation of the fact that, you just can't go to Utah in a lot of cases and go elk hunting. You can't go to Arizona and just go elk hunting. There are some opportunity there for over the counter, but very, very limited.
Right.
And so a lot of people are gravitating towards Idaho. A lot of people are gravitating towards Colorado because it's over the counter. You can just go.
Yeah.
And it's awesome that that's still out there. But I think from a state level, it's tricky because you have to be careful because you're trying to manage for quality and quantity. And if you're not careful, all of a sudden the quantity goes down and then the quality really starts to disappear.
Right.
So, and I think that's where like Arizona, Utah, inherently you talk about those states in your mind, you instantly think huge bulls because that's what is there. Yeah. And that's Colorado has kind of found a happy medium, right? They have over the counter areas, but then they also have draw areas.
Right.
Where I have a friend in Clear Lake that's got, I think 18 points for certain units in Colorado that he just keeps banking them and banking them and banking them. And he's like, yeah, I want to go and shoot a 380 plus. I'm like, well, you'll probably have that opportunity.
Yeah.
Because you're putting in for some unbelievable units.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But go ahead.
Well, the only thing I was going to say is to those people coming from back east, this is my opinion. Okay, take it for what it's worth. Any elk, spike, raghorn, 5x5, of course a 6x6, or a cow, not a calf, but a fully mature cow, is a trophy with a bow.
Absolutely.
I am a firm, because I've taken over the years 3-4 cows, and a fully mature cow is going to produce 350, 360 pounds of meat. Whereas a spike is going to produce about 140, 150 pounds of meat. So if I have an opportunity at a cow, I've ate enough paper over the years that Randy likes to eat elk meat. So Randy's going to shoot that cow. And then what I do is I'm really careful when I take the hide off, and I get the hide tanned.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some over my couches. I use one under my Christmas tree as a Christmas tree skirt. And then I give them away as gifts to people. And they're just beautiful. And it's the same memory for me, because one, if you come out every like I told Cole, hey, if you can come out for 8 days, try to push it to 10.
Mm-hmm.
If you can come out for 10 days, push it to 14. Every day you can be in the elk woods ups your odds of success.
Yes.
And if you can go home with something, one, the elk meat tastes delicious. Yes, everybody wants a 360 bull, but I'll be honest with you. I mean, I consider myself a successful elk hunter. I've killed a lot of elk. How many 6x6s have I killed?
Right. It's the same connotation with Iowa. Everybody thinks they're going to non-resident, they're going to come here and they're going to shoot a 180 plus. They are out there. Everybody thinks they're going to go out west, they're going to shoot a 360 inch 6x6, and they are out there, but it's just few and far between. And I think if you can go elk hunting with the expectation of, I want to try to harvest an elk, and that's your goal, that's a pretty awesome goal. And that's nothing to be ashamed of, and 100% everything to be proud of.
Yeah. Yep. And like last year, it was my choice. When that's big, I mean, it was a big spike. When that spike came in, I could have killed that thing 6 ways a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
But I've done it. I've killed enough of those. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And it was the 17th on the 16th. On the 17th, that 6x6 came in, and to me, it's the bull of a lifetime.
Yep.
Now he probably scores 300, 290, which, okay, I guess if you're into record books, that does put one in the record book in Pope and Young. And Cole's right. There are 360s, 340s, but there's only a handful of those.
Yep.
There's a lot more 5x5s. There's a lot more raghorns, because depredation, starvation, and the genetics.
The best.
I mean, I've seen some whoppers up there, and I just sent you a picture.
I know.
Of a toad.
Yeah.
Of a toad.
Yeah. If you don't mind, we'll probably put that up here. We'll put it right here. Bing. And it was that's a slobber knocker. I literally, and again, for anyone listening, don't look at your phone while you're driving, but I did, and then I almost crashed because I was like, whoa. I was like, whoa. It was a big bull. It was a really big one. Here, let's get you haven't seen this yet. Let's just get your candid response to this one. Oop, I'm trying to call you. Don't want to do that. That was phones. Here I am. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Yeah. Okay. So look at this one. We'll put this up on the screen. This is the first one he sent me. Okay. Like, hey, cool. Sweet. Yeah. Heck yeah. There you go.
That's a nice bull.
Yeah. Jackpot. And then there was this one.
Oh, baby.
Yeah, that's an old baby one. That's like dude, even the size of his body, you can see it in his butt and in his gut. Look at how big he is. He's just big.
It's a good one.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah, I mean, and that's what's really fun about elk hunting. And it's just like the Midwest, you never know when you're going to walk out there and you're going to see an absolute giant. And you never know when you're in a Western state when you're going to see something that it's just going to you're just going to be like, is that possible?
Yeah.
You're like, how does that thing grow out here like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So with that said, I want to read this to you, Randy. This is from a book. It's funny because I read this book as a young person. I was like a teenager. It's called Wild at Heart. It's a pretty interesting book. It's by a guy. Let me make sure I get his name right. I think it's John Eldridge. Let me just make sure I say his name right. Yep, John Eldridge. It's called Wild at Heart. And it's a heck of a book. But I read this book before I had ever gone elk hunting. And then I'm pretty sure I went elk hunting like the next fall. It really, really hit me. And it's kind of long, but it's really worth it. So I'm going to go through this. It says he's talking about hunting in the San Juan Wilderness in Colorado. He's solo hunting. He's just walking. He's just hunting in the mountains by himself. And he wrote this after he got back. And I think this is the epitome of why I love Western hunting, why I love elk hunting. This is everything. It says, the aroma of the pungent sage still clings to my jeans, and it clears my head as I gasp for air. In notably short supply at 10,000 feet, I am forced to rest again, even though I know that each pause broadens the distance between me and my quarry. Still, the advantage has always been his. Though the tracks I found this morning were fresh, only a few hours old, that holds little promise. A bull elk can easily cover miles of rugged country in the amount of time, especially if he's wounded or on the run. The wapiti, as the Indians called them, is one of the most elusive creatures we have left in the lower 48. They are the ghost kings of the high country, more cautious and wary than deer and more difficult to track. They live at higher elevations and travel farther in a day than nearly any other game. The bulls especially seem to carry a sixth sense to human presence. A few times I have gotten close. The next moment they are gone, vanishing silently into the aspen groves so thick that you wouldn't have believed a rabbit could go through them. It wasn't always this way. For centuries, elk lived out on the prairies, grazing together on the rich grasses in vast numbers. In the spring of 1805, Meriwether Lewis described passing herds of lollygagging elk by the thousands as he made his way in search of the Northwest Passage. At times, the curious wandered so close to these passing wagons that they could throw sticks at them, like dairy cows blocking the road. But by the end of the century, westward expansion had pushed elk high up into the Rocky Mountains. Now they are elusive, hiding out at timberline like outlaws until heavy snows force them down for the winters. If you would seek them now, it is on their terms, in forbidden haunts well beyond the reach of civilization. And that's why I come, and why I linger here still, letting the old bull get away. My hunt, you see, actually has little to do with elk. I knew that before I came. There is something else I am after out here in the wild. I am in search for an even more elusive prey, something that can only be found through the help of the wilderness. I am looking for my heart.
Ooh.
And dude, if you can see, I've got goosebumps every time I read that, dude. I just want to get out. I just want to run through that wall right now. But dude, when he talks about that, how they're all outlaws of the high country, that they don't come down until the snow pushes them down, and you're going to find them on their terms in forbidden haunts, and that's the way that it is. That's not how it always used to be.
Right.
We used to have elk in Iowa.
Yeah, exactly.
They're naturally a prairie animal, but that's not the way it is anymore.
Right.
They've just been pushed up farther and farther and farther away from civilization. The only place they can find themselves is way up in the mountains.
Yeah.
And that's why I love elk hunting.
It's described it to a T, and what it does, like the vistas that you're going to see, Nick, that Cole has experienced.
Dude, you literally are going to it's going to blow your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause you can see from up on top of this mountain where we're going to be at, you can see what's called the Seven Devils. It's a series of mountain ranges off to the north. You can see for, maybe 100 miles, and it's just, and the vastness of it. And we think when we live our daily lives in vehicles and this is my world, and you step into that, you realize how really insignificant we are in the greater vastness that's around us. It's just, it rejuvenates my soul to go up there. One, because I visit places where I was when I was 30, and I remember things like when we go out, there'll be evenings that we go to spots where Cole and I went, and I'm going to be, hey, remember, remember this, remember that. And then where we camp, it's a beautiful spot where we camp. The vistas are beautiful. But for me personally, I mean, I gear up. I mean, I've probably sent Cole messages. Hey, only 280 days till elk hunting. I mean, I live for it. It's what I really enjoy. I'm passionate about it. I try to have fun with it at the same time. Like last year, I was a little bit more because I knew I was going to hunt almost the whole season, and I feel fortunate to do that. But like one morning I woke up and it was like, nope, I'm just going to sit here in camp and enjoy the cool breeze of the morning and cook myself an awesome breakfast and just enjoy the smell of the pine trees. And it's really interesting because by the time you guys walk off that mountain, the smells, you'll be so attuned to the smells of the woods and the rotting like flowers and vegetation and just the changes that you'll see. Aspens will just start turning yellow. But for me, I'm up there when they're green. I'm there during the change and I watch them fall. I mean, it's a magical month for me. Yeah. I live it. So.
Well, and I agree with you. And I think, I mean, I think it's the thing that I always try to do whenever I go on hunting trips, whatever it might be. And especially, being in Idaho with Randy is you just try to enjoy every part of it.
Right.
I mean, it's funny. Some of the parts that I remember most the last time we were there, and I don't know why this sticks with me, is when we would get done hunting in the mornings and we would drive the side-by-side back. And I think sometimes Randy would, he'd be like, because I love seeing the country and I love seeing the breathtaking views. So he would like drive me a way roundabout way, go way out this way, and I don't know why. I just remember those side-by-side drives right back, and he would stop and he'd go, oh, hey, we used to hunt elk here years ago and then this burned, or they logged this section and it really changed it. Now the elk don't come through here as much. Yeah. They've actually bumped over here, And so I love that part, And so, I think I think just trying to keep that perspective, because that's the other thing about elk hunting is it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It can be discouraging at times, and they don't want to be found. I mean, just like that says in there, I mean, I love that. They're like outlaws. They want to be left alone. Yep. They're up there and they don't want to be messed with, and they're trying to survive, and their instincts are so incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And so there can be a lot of time where it's just, there's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of lull. There's a lot of, can be discouragement, but you just mentally have to try to really just glasses half full and try to enjoy all of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because unfortunately, sometimes you can let the first 6 days of a hunt and the way it may not be working out affect how you do day 7, 8, and 9 when you really need to be super sharp. Yeah. You've kind of let that edge dull a little bit. You know what I mean? Yeah. So try to keep it fun and try to find that enjoyment in every single thing. And again, getting to spend time with your good friends makes it even better. Yeah, so exactly. But yeah, man, it's going to be, I'm really excited, Randy. It's going to be super awesome. And we've been mentioning this, but haven't been mentioning this, but we're going elk hunting here.
Yeah.
And not very long.
No.
I mean, when this podcast airs, we're going to just about be there.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to be there for a couple weeks. Yep. Yeah. We've got a good stretch of time.
Yeah.
And we're going to really try to get after it. But Randy, thanks a ton, dude, for being on here. I really, really appreciate it, dude. Thanks for spending some time. I know you've got a lot going on and a busy schedule, so thanks for taking the time to talk to us today, dude.
No problem. I always love talking about elk hunting.
Yeah. Yep. All right, well, I think that's a wrap.
Yep.
Ozonics Killerwinds Podcast, another episode in the books. I'm Cole Tanner.
I'm Nick Simon.
Moral of the story is if you have an opportunity to get out there elk hunting, get out there and do it.
Go do it.
Yep, it's a pretty awesome thing. And again, thanks, Randy, for being here. I really appreciate it, man.
You're welcome.
Done.